What's up, everybody? Paul Hickey here with nooffseason.com. Welcome to another episode of the F1 Card Strategy Show. We haven't done this show in a while, and I've got a special guest host today from bobscardmarket.com. This is Rob Misora. He joined Kendall and I on the Flagship Show, the Sports Card Strategy Show earlier this week, and we figured we would double down with Rob. How you doing, man?
So putting me to work in this first week.
Yeah, here you come and you want to partner and sponsor, and I'm putting you to work. But
Yeah.
It's actually because when we first met, you and I were talking about F1 a little bit, and it's because I kind of asked you like what sport you were most into, and I think you said F1. F1 was in your answer, so I said, all right, well, we haven't done an F1 card strategy show in a while, and the audience wants more and more F1 content, so I said, let's do one. So here we are.
Yeah, that's definitely my response to you is probably some recency bias there. Not saying that I'm not into F1, but I think it's probably important for your audience to know, I guess, my F1 history, if you don't mind. So I've been into sports cards for a while now and been buying and selling sports cards and really just load up to mid-end stuff. And back when 2020 Chrome F1 came out, I mean, obviously that was a huge thing and just was going gangbusters. And I had a lot of people in the car community being like, oh, you got to get into F1. You got to do this. You got to do that. And a lot of them were just saying, just watch the show on Netflix. Just do that. And you'll enjoy that. And then it'll go from there. And so I'm like, all right. So I started watching an episode. And I don't know about you, but my wife and I are always struggling to find things to watch because there's so many things out there. And started watching one episode, and sooner or later, my wife's like, I like this. And so we just powered our way through the rest of the seasons and finished up at the beginning of last year, and we're hooked. Completely hooked. We watched like every race last year, every Saturday and Sunday, watched qualifying in the race. And so that's kind of melding with the card world now as I'm starting to get a little bit more into F1 cards. But
that's awesome. That's what I love about sports. It's a sports in addition to, obviously the athletes and the performances. It's really a soap opera, and like F1, no one has exemplified that better recently than Netflix with Drive to Survive and F1 and the media group that bought F1 and has worked with Netflix on that. Basically, like, the NFL is a soap opera. The NBA is a soap opera. That's why there's massive interest in those sports domestically, and F1 globally now, and more so in the United States now because of Drive to Survive. So I love that. And I definitely kind of entered the same way. Like, I entered F1 cards in a similar fashion. I listening to Card Talk Pod, I got to give those guys a shout out. Lou, Tyler, and Ryan, they do a good job, and they got into F1, I think, probably as early as anybody in the recent card market. And so listening to their show, knowing those guys a little bit, and watching Drive to Survive, kind of hearing about it through them and how that helped them enter into the F1 card world, became an entry point for me. But then what really sparked my interest in it is how simple it is. So for somebody who doesn't know soccer, it's super hard to get into soccer. Like, it's very, very complicated. For somebody who doesn't know baseball, it's kind of the same thing. But for anybody who doesn't know F1, and if you've followed any other sports, I think it's actually much simpler to get into card investing in F1 because there's only 10 teams, 20 drivers. Drivers move around a lot from season to season, but other than that, there's not like transactions all the time like there are in other sports that you have to follow. So I think it's simple, and I like to, it's simple compared to other sports, and I like to get into it from a card prospecting perspective as well, because as you know, 2022 Topps Chrome just came out, and so it's the third year of Topps Chrome F1. And within the Topps Chrome and, of course, Topps Flagship, there are prospect cards. So that's a good segue into one of the topics I wanted to talk to you guys about on today's show is some of the things that have caught my eye in this set. One of them we talked about on the Sports Card Strategy show with Kendall, but Logan Sargeant has his first like investable cards. So he's racing for Williams this year, but his cards are F2 prospect cards essentially, but they're his first autos and they're part of the 2022 Topps Chrome F1 release. And another guy who didn't really have any investable cards, and I actually bought this one.
Oh, you did?
Fittipaldi. If
I was going to bring him up,
you recognize the last name Fittipaldi. I actually bought this out of 50 gold refractor auto for what I think is a pretty good price, $103.50, 17 bids on this card. You can't really ever tell what's going to gem when you buy something on eBay, but looking at this photo, the photos that are in this listing, and I haven't received the card yet, but I'm thinking I'm going to submit it to PSA. So you've got like these first autos of these guys, Sargeant, Fittipaldi. Fittipaldi's still in F2, but for those of you that are familiar with baseball cards, to me, these are like the Bowman first autos of these guys. The only difference being that they actually get released in the same set, in the same release as the F1 cards as well. So what do you think, Rob? What do you think of this 2022 Topps Chrome release so far? Have you been following it at all?
Well, it's funny that you brought him up because I had actually had his name written down as maybe someone to target a little bit, but you're exactly right in comparing it to Bowman prospects and first Bowman prospects. And the funny thing that's comparable to that is the price at which these cards of drivers that have never raced F1, they're just maybes. You know, they're racing F2. They might not even make an F1 team, just like the minor league baseball players. But their prices are just go way too high, in my opinion, for something that they have not done. Like they could make it to an F1 team and be in one race and just be nothing.
Yeah.
And I always,
absolutely.
it's a frustrating part of the Bowman prospecting part of collecting, but it's very entertaining and it's very fun and it's a big gamble for sure. But like you were saying earlier, I think in F1 it's probably less of a gamble than in baseball, because baseball you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of players that they're competing with, where in racing it's, you got 20 F1 drivers, and I'm not that familiar with F2, but I assume there's probably 20 to 30 F2 drivers. Same with F3 and F4. So the pool is a lot smaller, so the odds of actually getting it right are a lot higher.
Yeah, and shout out to Lefty McKee. He's in the chat. So Kendall, good to see you. Good to see you driving. Looking up F2 just because I want to try to get this right. Yeah, it looks like there are, if I'm counting correctly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 teams, and 2 drivers per team in F2 right now. F3, there are no cards for F3, but we do know a lot of F3 drivers move up to F2. F2 drivers, like to your point, Rob, don't always move up to F1, but just the prospect that they may move up to F1. So like for those of you who don't know Enzo Fittipaldi, who I just mentioned, and Rob kind of agrees with me, his grandfather was Emerson Fittipaldi, who was a F1 driver and was very successful into the late 80s, early 90s. Sorry, IndyCar driver. He retired from IndyCar in 96. So not he was in F2, F1, IndyCar. So he's a legend, and that name definitely is going to be a name where if Enzo's like the 3rd ranked driver in, well, not 3rd ranked, but he's kind of top 5 in F2. So the fact that he has this card and it's his first card, I'm just kind of going on, hey, the name. If I can get a PSA 10 on it, and whatever hype there is about this guy, that's probably when I'm going to sell. To your point, Rob, like I'm not necessarily going to wait to see if he's any good or even makes it to F1.
Yeah, it's just like in baseball, you want to sell right when they get called up. You don't want to wait, or maybe they're in AAA and they're hitting bombs and playing awesome. That's when you want to sell. But Emerson Fittipaldi is number 30 all time in points, in case you're wondering. And Enzo was 8th place last year in the F2 standings.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
Not a great year, but he's up there.
Yep. Yeah. So you're right. You're absolutely right. Sell on the call up. So that, the question there for this year is, does Oscar Piastri do anything? I bought a bunch of his cards last year. I still have all of the ones that I bought. I have not sold on him yet. There was a little bit of hype in August, when he finally joined McLaren. There was that whole controversy. I thought that might be a good time to sell depending on what you bought him for. But when I looked at my research even further, like he came out so high. His prices were so high for his 2021 Topps Chrome autos, because that was his first cards. There aren't many Oscar Piastri cards. I think there might be one card, and it's not an auto in the 2022 set. So we have this Oscar Piastri 2021 group of cards that I think I will probably look to list for sale just right at the beginning of this F1 season, because I know interested to see what the audience thinks of this, especially Kendall, who's in the audience right now. But I think Oscar will be good, but I don't know if I want to ride the roller coaster of, him not getting in the podium for like his whole first year or something, and then having his cards until he, finally starts to win, maybe in who knows when, right? That could be it took George Russell a long time to win a race. So it could be the same for Oscar. And so what I'm thinking is sell Oscar on the hype of just the season starting. But what do you think of that strategy overall?
Yeah, I think you can list it now. And the reason being is I actually just sold one of his cards, and I mentioned I've started to dabble in F1 flipping a little bit. But I bought his purple refractor PSA 10 for 120 at the beginning of December, and we just sold it for 300.
Great move.
So
great move.
Typically that's what I do, is we just list it for double whatever, and then slowly lower the price as time goes on. But yeah, I'm looking at market movers even, and over the last 90 days, his price has dropped the most of any F1 driver, 51%. But I think 90 days ago, there wasn't a lot of hype.
Right.
But I think as the season's starting to gear up, the thing I'm worried about with him is specifically to McLaren. Like they're my team. I don't know if you can even see this logo, but this is my Christmas present for my wife.
Yeah, looking good.
Is there's something with the team, and I don't know what it is, and just kind of seeing some news articles here and there, but there's something with the way they run things that Daniel Ricciardo didn't get along with. And that's why he exited, or part of I think he cut his contract short, if I'm not mistaken. Lando's figured it out, and he knows he's kind of meshing well with the team, but I'm worried that there could be some growing pains with Oscar, just because of that. And maybe he'll fit right in. We'll see. But
I mean, he could be like Cam Newton, where like Cam came in and just like caught lightning in a bottle and was amazing in his first season. And, other rookies have kind of done that. Of course, Cam Newton just kind of came to mind because I don't think anybody expected him to do it. I don't expect Oscar to be like a stud this year. But I talked him up all last year and told people to execute on exactly what you did. So I've been saying like all the way through December, buy Oscar and then flip him just right in Q1 at the beginning of the hype, when the hype cycle starts for F1. So you might be a little bit early selling now, but I agree with you. Like you could probably list it now, especially in a buy it now format. If you're listing it for the price that you really want and then taking offers, that's a great call. Adam Adamson, welcome to the show. New name on the show. Glad to have you, Adam. He says it's hard even in McLaren. he's good, but he's against Lando and Lando's car and team. So that's true. I mean, like, I think if you in F1, we do have to consider there are F1 collectors and fans of a particular team, constructor, if you will. And so then if you are investing in one driver for that team, are you really going to invest in the other, especially when the other one might be like the number 2 driver, like in Oscar's case? So this is actually a good segue too. So like, Rob, I know you kind of wanted to talk about people collecting F1, like how people collect F1 and what are causes of some of the market swings. So we're on kind of that topic, right? Both of those topics right now a little bit. What were you thinking in terms of like what you wanted to bring to the show to talk about how people collect F1?
Yeah, and really, I was just curious about that, thinking through, like, as we think of other sports, like, the 3 major sports, it's most of the time it's centered around a team. It's where you live or where maybe you grew up. And I'm a Cubs fan because I grew up in Chicago. But it's weird with F1 because you have these teams, 10 teams, that have 2 drivers each, but then the drivers also, unless you're really good or have a really good relationship, they switch around a lot. I mean, you can make the comparison to getting traded on a pro sports team, but it's almost like I'm just curious what you think. More people collect the constructor or they collect the driver, and then
that's a great point.
And when you talk about, and maybe, I mean, maybe you have some experience how it could be different here in the United States versus how they maybe collect in Europe. Because for me personally, I think a lot of the teams are based in Europe, if I'm not mistaken. So I feel like in that area, they might be more focused on collecting the constructor. Whereas here in the United States, maybe we're just going to collect the driver and see what happens. Like we're not really partial to any team. So I was just curious.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've never really thought about that, but I think you're right. That is a big difference between other sports. And we do talk a lot about how when a player gets traded, that now there's a new market for him because of that local market that he's going to. And F1 is different in that regard. There's really not a clear-cut way to tell who collects what. I'd like to know what the audience thinks. So drop us a line in the comments or hit us up on social media. I'm at No Offseason Card. If you want to tweet at me about how you collect F1, I'd like to have a good feedback loop there and then report back on the show. As far as Europe and the United States go, what's interesting about that is I like your hypothesis, but unfortunately, there's no distribution in Europe for those cards. So even especially in Spain, but even the guys that I know from the UK and going to the London card show this past year, I learned that basically all of those vendors at the London card show that were set up to sell get most of their cards through breaks. So even like all of their NBA, NFL, and F1 cards, anything that's like soccer related, some they can get through better distribution in Europe, but like mostly everything they get that American collectors are interested in, they get through Americans via breaks, which is like, I'm not against breakers or breaking by any means, but I don't think it's the most efficient way to flip cards if you're going to like get in breaks and then try, like that doesn't, that's not like a strategy. So it's really hard. So, it's not, I think we all hope that Fanatics sort of fixes that when they really take over things. They obviously already own Topps, so they already own that license. But so maybe sooner rather than later, they can fix the F1 distribution thing. I know we have actually quite a larger following in the UK and in Europe than some other podcasts. So if those of you who are listening want to drop us a line in the comments, let us know like if they have if you have access to at retail or just better online distribution for you to cut down on the shipping cost. let us know. We'd love to know about that. So,
Yeah, I think it's a lot of that, a lot of those things. Like you got the racing fans, and to me, those fans are probably the ones that are going to cheer for a constructor. I'm a Ferrari guy or I'm a McLaren guy. Like they love those cars their whole life. Like they're into that. And then, like Adam Adamson said in the chat, like since Drive to Survive came out, it's built these personalities, good or bad. Some of the drivers hate it, of of the drivers, and people have become fans because of the show, and whether they're likable or not. Like my wife hates Max Verstappen because of the show, and I think he's gotten a lot better and a better personality, and he's not just a jerk all the time. But the show did paint him in a bad spot, so she doesn't like him. But that could drive some people to like certain drivers. And then I think another piece of this is where they're from, and a lot of people want to cheer for their home country. Like uh, Fittipaldi is from Brazil, and I don't think we don't have a Brazilian driver. I don't think yet or now. So if he were to get into F1, that's the whole country that's behind him. We got Logan Sargeant, who's the first American driver since I think 2015. I read
Okay.
something like that. So like that combined with Drivers to Survive will hopefully, and then we got the Las Vegas race this year, so an additional race here should give a huge boost to the fandom and the interest in America, in the United States, to F1. But there's the whole country part of it too. Like, you
Yeah.
know,
I think you're absolutely right about the country part.
yeah.
And I like that F1 is international. I think if we could get better distribution internationally of the F1 cards, and there's the whole logistics with shipping costs and everything. Like card investors and collectors don't like when things eat into their potential profit margin. So the shipping is weird. But yeah, not to get on too much of a tangent there, but you bring up some really good points with the collecting. And I'd love to know more about. I think that definitely, like Adam in the chat makes a good point about favorites from Drive to Survive. Rob, you've made a lot of good points about countries and constructors, kind of like latching on to whether it's someone from your home country or your hometown, or there's a team with a connection to a country. It's all of that, which is different than NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB, which is cool. So I wanted to ask you about the other topic that I know you wanted to talk about is some of the causes of the market swings, right? So like, Charles Leclerc last year, his prices spiked huge when he got off to his hot start. So we know that performance definitely plays a role, but do you think it plays a role in F1 as much as it plays a role in other sports? What do you think kind of causes the market swings in F1?
That's why I wanted to bring it up. I wanted to kind of talk through it.
Yeah.
Because I was looking at kind of the price movements and looking at who won the races, and then trying to match it up a little bit. And there wasn't. I did see the Charles Leclerc spike, and I think the reason there was a spike is because it was the beginning of the year, when kind of everyone is in first place, everyone has a chance to win the championship at the end of the year. And so when you get off to a good start, you're in a good spot, and you still have a chance, right? And so he won. I don't know how many races he won in the beginning of the year, but everyone thought like, oh, he's going to win the champion. Yeah, he's going to win the championship. So that drove the spike, and then Max ends up winning like every race after that. So I could foresee that happening again at the beginning of the year until things will start to level out. I think a win towards the back half of the year doesn't really do much. I looked at George Russell, who won the last race, I believe, and there wasn't a spike. Like it was the last race. Like it was a weird race. It was an awesome race, but there wasn't a spike there. And then some of the other ones that won like towards the back half. I think it's the races at the beginning are a big factor because of the championship, but once Max starts winning 10, 15, it's a
Yeah.
lost cause for everyone else.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is a mix between the seasonality of where we are in the F1 calendar, like you said, and also like how much do the races mean towards the end of the year. So like I think to a certain extent we're all new to this, where like in my mind this is probably like we're going into our third season of trying to figure this out, because you had the Lewis and Max sort of controversy towards the end of 2021 where Max beat him out, but like that was right after 2020 Topps Chrome released, so that was kind of like year one. Last year was year two, right? And but the weird thing about last year was that there was no drama towards the end. To your point, like Max already had it wrapped up. George's first win didn't really mean anything because it was like Max already had it wrapped up, so not that many people were paying attention. To me, that was a huge F1 buying window, like we talked about earlier in the show, where I think that, I mean, I was telling everybody to buy Lando. I was pointing out data from market movers. You mentioned market movers earlier. I was pointing out data from market movers about George, Lando, Charles, even Max and Lewis. Like they were all down. Their specific PSA 10s. Some of them, depending on the driver, were like a sapphire or a purple refractor or whatever. But a lot of their PSA 10s were down like 50, 60, 70% from where they were earlier in the season, like to your point. So I think that you're right. I think number one, huge hype cycle at the beginning of the season. Prices naturally drop after that. And then depending on how dramatic and meaningful the end of the season is, there may or may not be another spike, but there yet don't appear to be like just race specific spikes based on driver performance. You know what I mean? Because even George last year, I think he was in the top 5 for like the first 10 or 11 races, but it didn't really matter to his pricing. It didn't really have an effect on his pricing.
I think when you're looking at the results, it's like George or Lando even last year. Like I would look at for drivers that were always like right there. Like they always had a chance. They were always in the top 5 or 6. Like we always joke that Lando's always in 7th place. Like no matter what. Like qualifying 7th place, races 7th place. He's always number 7. I feel like. But he's always, he has a chance if things break his way to win a race. So if you look at last year's results and see those guys that are in the top hunt and then probably have low prices because they're not winning, they're not getting a championship, but they could have a shot this year. And I think the news, and when I say news, like contract decisions, drives a big piece, especially when we go back to the prospecting part of it, is, I was looking at like some contracts that are up this year, like Yuki Tsunoda, Gasly, Lance Stroll. Like, so they're driving with the intent of trying to get signed again, but then mid-season, which is kind of weird how F1 does it. Like, they could tell Lance Stroll, well, I know his dad owns the team, so he might do that to him, but they could tell Pierre Gasly, like, hey, we're not re-signing you. So now they have an open spot, and all of a sudden your guy Fittipaldi is looking pretty good as maybe an option to backfill. So I think the news, and we don't know, like that could come out of nowhere. Like you can't predict when that's going to happen, but I think contracts are something you can look at to maybe make some calls.
Yeah, that's a great call. We're kind of digging into off the track type news and anticipating the upcoming hype cycle, and then acquiring the card and being set up to sell. So you've got the card treasury store on eBay, right? So everybody should go check that out. Of course, you also run bobscardmarket.com, the Discord channel, but so we want people to check that out too. But let's talk about like being set up to sell, because I think when you go, whatever hype cycle you're looking to crystallize your profits through, whether it's the beginning of the F1 season or the driver performance idea, or to your point, the off the track news cycle with driver contracts and who might fill somebody's seat. Great ideas. But doesn't that mean that you need to have your hypothesis a little bit early, not only acquire the card, get it ready to sell, but then be set up to sell either on eBay or some other kind of marketplace? So because you run your own eBay store that's very successful, maybe talk us through like what are some of the best ways that people can do that? I mean, your Oscar Piastri flip is a good example.
Yeah, the way we do it is, and it might not be the best way, but it might be the most efficient way, is when we purchase something that's a true investment and something that we want to hold on to for a bit and sell, later down the road. We're not looking to as a quick flip or anything like that. Our target is to try to double our money, and I know that's a pretty ambitious target in most cases. So we'll price the card at that point, and in some instances, if you're looking at all the cards on eBay, it's going to look pretty outrageous and pretty high. And there is the risk, like, oh, the card treasury's got their prices just ridiculously high, like these guys are idiots. But the reward is that someone actually buys it at that price, like the Oscar Piastri, for example. And then we have a process put in place where we lower our prices every 4 months by 10%, and then eventually it'll get to where the market is. Now, having it already up there saves us a lot of time, so that, say, the first race of the year, I still have that Piastri up there and he wins, I would probably maybe lower it to where the market is to sell it, if that makes sense. So it's already up there. I just have to change the price. And it saves us a lot of time. I'm not digging through boxes to try to find it and then to list it. Like, it's, I know that's may seem, minute when you're saving 10 minutes or whatever, but when you have thousands and thousands of cards, you're trying to save as much time as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you ever find yourself like taking which I wish eBay could allow you to change your buy it now to an auction? But do you ever find yourself like taking down the buy it now, but then listing the same card as an auction if it doesn't sell?
No, I mean, it would have to get down to, pretty much under $5 or something ridiculous.
You're selling everything with your method, basically. You're not finding it where it's like, okay, well, this didn't sell for whatever reason, so we're just gonna
okay. we are operating under the strategy. We are in no hurry to really sell anything.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So we're building a store, we're building inventory, and we're letting it sit out there, and then, like I said, lowering the prices as the markets move, but 10% every 4 months, and eventually it'll sell. And if it gets down to $1 and doesn't sell, then it gets taken off. And
you're doing like a reverse auction. You're like you're
pretty much.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's cool. I haven't heard that yet until now, so I'm glad I asked you the question. That's really cool. And I think that's actually very valuable to the audience, because I get asked a lot of questions from our audience members about everything from like going through their old collection and which cards to grade, to obviously which players and athletes to target, to like how to sell, how to maximize profits and things like that. So I actually think, I'm glad I asked the question, because you do have a very legit eBay store, the Card Treasury. You do a lot in the hobby at the Discord channel, bobscardmarket.com. And so I'm glad I asked you that question, because I do the auction model a lot, because I get frustrated with, like, I'll put a card out for a buy it now or best offer, and I'm a little bit impatient. Kendall knows this. I'm a little bit impatient with like selling cards. So I've had success with auctions, but but with auctions, it has to be more of listing the right card at the right time. Whereas in your method, it's kind of, you're not worried about it. You like the card, you think it's going to sell, you list it at double, and then you lower it accordingly until it sells, and you still make profit. So I like that.
Yeah. If you want, I mean, the auction method is definitely good if you need cash flow.
Yeah.
You need things to move at certain times, but like you said, it has to be timed perfectly. It has to end at the right time of day. It has to end on the right day. Like, there's better days to post things and list things, but
yeah. And it's good. It's good to have a store with inventory up. And so I think I'm actually going to take your advice. I've been waiting to list a bunch of my cards in an auction at a specific time, but why not just buy it now and price it accordingly, and then lower it like you do. So I might steal your method there with at least some of my cards, maybe the Oscar ones, because I've got probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 PSA graded Oscar cards. They're all 9s and 10s, and well, one's an 8 actually, unfortunately. But anyway, another thing I wanted to ask you about, Rob, is 2020 Topps Dynasty. This is a release that I don't hear a lot about, but I talk about it quite a bit because I feel a certain way about it. I wrote a article for Sports Card Investor. I contribute a lot of articles to Sports Card Investor on a regular basis, and one of them I did was on the top 10 drivers and their cards from 2020 Topps Dynasty. It's obviously a very, Topps Dynasty is a unique release in that basically you're spending a couple $1,000s on one card and you don't know what that card's going to be. And the bottom of that, you could get crushed because you could get a team principal. Like you could get Claire Williams from 2020 Topps Dynasty, which would suck. Or you could get George Russell or Max Verstappen or Lewis, and so you risk a lot in that you could get like a $40 card for $2,500 or $3,000, whatever that box sells for. I think it might be closer to $3,000, but there are a lot of interesting plays there because they're all out of 10 or less. They're all on card autos with gear in them of some sort, whether it's like a glove or a zipper, part of a jacket, whatever. And I think that there's some cards in that set that could eventually be the first $1 million F1 card. Like if you get a 1-of-1 Lewis on card patch or or if you get like a 1-of-1 Max with a sick patch in it, and then Max goes on to win the next 10 F1 titles and be the best of all time and actually become likable and in the media and all that. That's a lot there, right? That has to happen. Yeah. But like, I think if any F1 card gets there, it could be the Dynasty. And what do you think? I mean, am I way off with this or, I don't know. Have you dabbled in the Topps Dynasty at all?
I have not. But going back to the first thing you brought up about breaks, like that's the perfect product to get into a break. Like I wouldn't, if I'm sure it's done by driver or by team, maybe, I don't know, but I would never, and I wouldn't suggest anyone go just buy a box of Topps Dynasty. I know the Max, I think you're right. Like Max Verstappen would probably be the only one where that could possibly be $1 million card. And that would probably, you said did they do that in 2020 or was 2020? 2021? So it'd probably be one out of there. And I mean, he's already number 7 all time in points, and he's still what, 20 something? He's young, early 20s.
Yeah, I feel like I want to say 25.
Granted, there's more races and whatever, but still, he's going to blow past Lewis Hamilton for the all time points. So yeah, I agree. Like if there's any card that could be $1 million card, it would be that. But
and there could be a Topps Chrome 1-of-1 something that's out there that I'm missing, but I just feel like what those Dynasty cards are basically like the National Treasures, true RPAs that people talk about that end up going for, millions of dollars for Luka or Mahomes or whatever, right? And so if Max, and we all talk about Leclerc maybe being this, Russell maybe being that. Well, Max already is that. Like Max is already that, and he's their age basically. So that's why I think it's interesting to me to look at that, and good to get your take on it.
Well, an out of 10 2020 Max sold for $37,000. So,
yep. And I'd have to go reference my article, which I don't necessarily want to spend time doing right now. I don't have it pulled up, but I do. If you guys check out sportscardinvestor.com and just click on, if you want the shortcut is just click on my name and then go find the 2020 Topps Dynasty. It's got like the top sales from that product. And it's not that far. I mean, it's definitely nowhere close to $1 million in any of those sales, but I don't think it's as far off as you might think, to where if you were to go back and look at some of the $1 million sales from other sports, what that card was bought for maybe 2 or 3 transactions prior to when it hit $1 million. So like,
yeah, you're talking like 10 years from now, it could be, yeah. It's not
5
anytime
years
soon.
from now,
Yeah,
10 years from now, not tomorrow for sure.
Right.
Not later this F1 season. Which is basically what I'm glad you clarified that, though, because basically all of my content is like 6 to 12 months, whereas that prediction is actually more like 5 to 10 years for sure.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, let's see. So one other thing I wanted to try to do here today when I have guests on the show, guest hosts, is re-rank my rankings, right? So I rank a certain way at nooffseason.com. So we've talked about Bob's Card Market so far. Go to bobscardmarket.com. We've talked about Market Movers so far. Go to marketmoversapp.com. Use the promo code NOOFFSEASON to get your first month for only $1. And we've talked about nooffseason.com. So if you want a free premium membership for a year to nooffseason.com, email me at paul@nooffseason.com and I'll hook you up. And so we're about to re-rank my F1 card rankings with Rob Misora from Bob's Card Market. So there's only 11 drivers in here. I don't have Fittipaldi on here yet.
So what's your criteria? Like, what are we ranking these on?
Yeah. So the criteria basically is at the top level. If you were to look at over the next 12 months, who is going to be the most solid place to put your money over the next 12 months, not who to buy now, right? So if this were who to buy now, it might be Enzo Fittipaldi at the top, or it might be, we might find some data on Lando that's like, oh, you got to buy this one Lando card right now because of like the market, right? Well, it's too much to keep up with from an overall ranking standpoint. The rankings would be moving all the time if we did it that way. So instead, what we do is we say, over the next 12 months, who's going to provide people that look at this list with the most opportunities to sell them for profit, just based on who they are, based on their situation. And so then when you click down into the player profiles for each of these, the driver profiles, for example, we can click into George Russell just to show what that looks like. But then you see what the actual recommendation is at that point in time for that player. So it might be George Russell for specific reasons. We think he's a buy and hold right now, right? And then we say, here's the card data. And then down at the bottom, we say, here's the play for George Russell. So I say, here's the cards we think you should buy. Here's when we think you should buy them. Here's when you should be prepared to sell them and why, right? Whereas when we just look at the rankings, it's like, who's going to be the most solid over the next 12 months that's going to give people the most opportunities to essentially flip them for cash. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a little bit. So you got the part of consistency and security. So like, which drivers could you invest your money in and really not worry about losing, and maybe potentially have an opportunity to grow a little bit?
I would say yes, but it's the other way around. It's actually like, we're going to rank somebody higher that we think you're going to be able to buy and then flip for a profit more than somebody who's secure. So like, for example, and that's actually the difference between like Max and Lewis, right? So like, I would say that if we ranked based on who's the most secure driver, Lewis would probably be number one, because we would be saying, because if you were to ask me like, what driver should you put your money into for the next like X amount of years and like not worry that you're going to lose money, I'd for sure say Lewis Hamilton. But I don't really care about not losing money over the next several years. That's kind of pointless to me. What's actually fun is I want to buy somebody now. I want to have the opportunity to buy somebody over the next however many weeks or months, and then know that there's an opportunity to flip them for more money. And so we try to rank on who's going to have the opportunity at certain points to buy with other points to sell within a 12-month window.
Yeah. So if I'm thinking about this from a 12-month standpoint, like a year from now, or over the course of the year, like you were saying, how many times are you going to have opportunities to sell at a higher value? I mean, I almost put Max and Lewis towards the bottom of the list. I don't see their values spiking that much. They're good. Like, that's it. Like, there's nothing, we know they're good. They win a lot of races, although Lewis didn't win any last year, but their value is where it's at. Now, if you're asking me 5-10 years from now, I think you should buy Max now and hold for 5 to 10 years when he's number one on every single record sheet and passing Lewis. But over the course of this year, I don't see. I mean, everyone knows he's good, and I don't see his value increasing that much. You have a lot of risk in the young guys like Logan Sargeant and
we don't have Fittipaldi on here, but
I think some good opportunities to maybe get some pulses that you're talking about. And two guys I wanted to talk about were Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez. They're number two, kind of. Sergio definitely number two, but Carlos and Charles kind of go back and forth. But I would say Carlos is the number two on their teams, so they're kind of forgotten about a little bit. But they're on good teams, so they're always going to be in the mix. And I mean, what if Carlos or Sergio, the first 2 or 3 races, like Max gets in an accident or Leclerc gets in an accident, or maybe Carlos, they're driving new cars. So maybe Carlos and Sergio are, more in tune with the car this year than they were last year. And maybe they're better than I don't think they're going to be better than Sergio's going to be better than Max, but they have an opportunity to actually win races, and they're always in the hunt. So, like, just imagine a scenario where Carlos Sainz goes out and is in the top 3 of 3 of the first 4 races. That's a huge spike. And looking at his values, him and Sergio are one of the lowest prices when you try to compare prices versus like points and wins. Like, it's night and day. Like, they have very low values compared to how they perform. So I would put those two I would put Carlos number 1 because I think he has a better path.
Most upside.
More upside than Sergio. I do love the battles between Sergio and Max, though. Those are fun to watch. George Russell I think he's slowly gaining the number 1 seat from Lewis, which is crazy to think about. I would go Carlos Sainz 1, then Russell 2. I think Russell's got the taste of winning after winning that last race, and he's got a good head on his shoulders. He's always very calm while he's driving, and I think he would have a good opportunity to get some wins and get some podiums. Do you want me to go through? I'm doing this on the fly, but
that's great so far because you're taking exactly what the concept is and applying it to your own hypothesis, which with what you know about the market related to each of the drivers, and then who has the most upside. So Sainz number 1, Russell number 2. It sounds like moving Perez up a little bit.
2 or Checo 3.
Checo
Sergio,
3, okay.
Sergio Perez is Checo for all of you that don't
yep.
watch the races.
Those of you who don't know.
Nickname.
So Sergio, Checo, Perez number 3, and then where would you move around this next row of and you already said Max and Lewis down at the bottom, which makes sense. I mean, I get that. So then how would you kind of reorganize this row of Leclerc, Piastri, and Lando?
Part of me wants to put Lando at 4, just because there's a lot yet to be proven, but I'm nervous because you've hyped him so much over the past 6 months to a year.
I don't have that big of an impact on
his
the
prices
F1
might
market,
be too high
me.
now. I put Lando 4.
This is good. This is good. What do you think of Logan Sargeant? Like you mentioned earlier that
I was reading some things and it doesn't sound like he's that good.
yeah.
Like I think it was like Williams kind of brought him on board to be, he was first American in a while. They announced it in Austin. He didn't even have the points to qualify for F1 when they announced it. He eventually got it, but I think it's more of a PR thing. So I'm kind of nervous about that. And plus, I think his prices are going to be pretty high,
a little inflated
because of that. Yeah.
Gasly and Ocon, I guess maybe the last two we haven't commented on yet in the show. What do you think of those?
Yeah, they're both in the same team. I would. Ocon might be a good one. Wow, Pierre Gasly's 40 years old. I didn't realize that.
No way. Is that right?
This website can't be right.
What website? I hope you're not on my website.
F1
but I hope you are on my
market
website, but I hope you're not getting that information. He's 26.
Okay, well, this is wrong. Now I'm questioning the rest of this. I'm looking at their contracts.
Okay.
But Gasly's contract's up after this year. So
I've always found him intriguing. Like his pricing seems low, but it seems like he's respected as a driver by the fans. Like he's accomplished. So? I mean, I don't know, but I mean,
I think he's very unlikable. But
okay, well, he's won races though.
Yeah.
So or a race, which is saying something. I mean, he's. I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm not tuned in to Gasly, but just I'm intrigued by his upside with his prices. But I mean, if people don't like him, that's a whole other story. I know people love Lando. So I'm definitely not saying spend your money on Gasly in lieu of, some of the other guys that I really like. But I'm just wondering what do you in general, the audience think of Pierre Gasly, the F1 card audience? I'd love to hear back from you on that. Rob's not sure. I'm not sure.
One guy that might be worth putting on your list is Fernando Alonso. Like he's a veteran in F1. He's up there towards the career points standings. He's number one for Aston Martin, getting paid $30 million a year, so he's not going anywhere. He is older, but Aston Martin was one of those teams that towards the end of the year started performing better and better and better, and they were, in fighting. It seems crazy to say, but they get really excited when they're fighting for sixth place. but they were, and so like they were in the mix. And Lance Stroll's contract's up after this year, so he's going to be the main guy. But
yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Like, I tend to overlook. Yeah, I tend to overlook the oldies but goodies. I will admit, like, for those of you who don't follow my content all the time, I tend to get really excited by the next potential prospect, and I tend to not get as excited personally. Like, I wouldn't go out and buy a Fernando Alonso card, but that's absolutely why I need Rob on the show, because like people like Rob on the show to say, hey, like this actually could be a play that you might want to consider. So I think I'm definitely going to take your analysis here, Rob, and tweak my F1 rankings, because
it's just low. It's low risk and there's upside. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like I would have at the beginning of last year, maybe Sebastian Vettel would have been another guy. That
he's just high floor, lower ceiling. That's all.
Right.
But I mean, there needs to be like there are those people out there, like a lot. I mean, that's not a bad way to go in sports card investing.
Another guy to think about is Nick DeVries. I don't know how to say it. So he's new. He filled in for I think he filled in for Alex Albon one race last year, and he got 9th place. He did awesome. Like he did great in like qualifying, if I remember correctly, but like almost immediately after that race, they're like, all right, we're gonna who ended up snatching him up? AlphaTauri.
AlphaTauri, yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's going to take over. He's going to be the number one on that team. Yuki Tsunoda is always crashing, so he's going to be the number one on that team, and he's good friends with Max Verstappen. But he doesn't have any carts.
Yeah.
He's got a 2020 Topps
now, probably.
Topps now, yeah. So, which a PSA 10 I think was like $40-$50, and the pop was fairly low. I mean, it's not. It's a picture of a car. It's not like his portrait.
Not exciting,
or anything.
but
not exciting. But
maybe there's a play.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a great call, though. I mean, I like that analysis because those like Sargeant didn't have any cards until this last release. Neither did Fittipaldi, and we're talking about them. And so Nick DeVries on the horizon, got to be somebody to look out for. Adam Adamson says Alonso's first year card was in 2021. That really surprises me. I'm not doubting that, but that's just surprising. Thanks for the nugget there, Adam. And all right, well, Rob, this has been an amazing show. Like, went by fast. Anything else you want to add before we head to the outro here? Would love to have you back on another F1 Card Strategy show sometime soon, man.
Yeah, it was awesome. One thing I was thinking about this, and I need to practice what I preach, is part of me thinks that because there was such a huge like craze and fad of 2020 Chrome when that came out, and just the demand for that, the prices skyrocketing, and then 2021 they obviously produced a ton more of it, and that was kind of a set that was probably forgotten about. But I think a good play would be to go to shows and start digging through dollar boxes, $5 boxes, $10 boxes, and you're probably going to find a lot of 2020 Chrome, which if you think 5 years from now, if F1 continues to grow, like that's the set. Like that's the number one set.
I love that call.
There's probably a lot of dealers out there that bought a ton of it when there was the hype and are still sitting on it and want to get rid of it. And you might be able to find some good deals and snatch up a lot of 2020 Chrome. So I need to
I like that.
I need to practice that, but before anyone else gets there.
Well, I'll be going to Atlanta's Culture Collision show next weekend, and I'm excited to look through some $5 boxes, like you said. And one other thing about the 2020 release, and I want to not only thank Rob Misora from bobscardmarket.com, but also Adam Adamson bringing it strong in his first appearance in the comments. He says Alonso was out of the driver's seat for a year, so that's why his first card was in 2021, which makes sense because it's always like the full year prior when you're looking at the new release. And so that's unique about F1. But the other unique thing about F1 that you made me think of, Rob, is like if you look at the 2020 Topps Chrome release, some guys have the RC logo on the card and other guys don't. And the two that do are Russell and Lando. And the two that don't, that maybe should, are Max and Charles Leclerc. And so when you look at those four guys and you're kind of comparing, like, why did they not put, I mean, I think I know why. I don't really need to get into that, but like just as a hypothetical question, like why do they not put it on Max and Charles, but they put it on Lando and George? And so what I mean by the point here is that when you 5, 6, 7 years from now, when we're looking back, and maybe like we know Max is going to be in a different stratosphere than those other three guys, but if the other three guys are then in a similar ilk to each other, but Lando and George have the RC logo, to me they clearly outsell Leclerc because they have that. Because for people coming into the hobby, that's what they're going to look for over the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So there's a couple unique things about that release and just about F1 cards in general that I think are interesting. So anyway, good stuff today. Rob, this was awesome. We're going to do it again. Everybody go check out bobscardmarket.com. And thanks again for watching and listening to the F1 Card Strategy Show. I'm Paul Hickey with nooffseason.com. If Lefty were here, he would say cue the rock music. Everybody have a good time.